Hey, it's the Bet Las Vegas and the Sporting Tribune. And from hosting the NFL draft last year to now, the Raiders having 12 picks. This is a big year for the Raiders. Of course, that number 7 slot for the Raiders. And joining us to talk about the draft is Trey Wingo, Chiefs Trends Officer at Caesars Sportsbook. And as always, thank you for joining us. We are making this a draft week tradition. But as we start, Trey, I want to give you the moment, give you the floor. You got the whole 24 seconds on the shot clock. Last month, a lot of people gave you slack about the Aaron Rodgers Jets deal. And my friend, it has finally happened. Anything you want to say to the haters?
No, none whatsoever. A lot of people are like, well, what did you think? I'm like, well, I didn't really think about it. I didn't pay attention because, look, I knew what was going to happen and it happened. So I will say one thing that was interesting that most people don't know is that when I said, this is happening, and then he went on the Pat McAfee show and said, I went into darkness thinking 90% that I was going to retire. That kind of freaked the Jets out a little bit. So the deal was in place, and then Aaron said that, and that caused the delay. So it took a little longer because of the words that Aaron used on the show, but the deal was in place before he went on the Pat McAfee show, and then he said what he said, and the Jets were like, hold on a minute.
I will say, Trey, like just for the Jets front office, like the whole situation, him doing that, what he was thinking during that, it would freak anybody out.
Correct.
But of course, the AFC East is kind of taking the mantle from the Wild Wild West last year, where this division is now stacked. Of course, you got Buffalo, you got Miami, and now the Jets, who presumably would have been a playoff contender if they had any sort of decent quarterback, let alone Aaron Rodgers. As you look at this division now, how do you think the Jets stack up against Miami and Buffalo?
It is weird, right? Because the weirdest thing about this is the Patriots are now by far the worst team in the division, and that you have to go
Never
back
heard
to
of that before.
Yeah, you have to go back to the mid '90s for that to be the case. I mean, that's how crazy it is, and that's got to drive Robert Kraft crazy. But look, the Jets are going to contend, but everyone just assumes that it's all going to work, right? I need to see it. Look, should it work? Absolutely. I mean, Alan Lazard is there. Mecole Hardman is there. They're going to get Breece Hall back. They might have to have 4 new starters on the offensive line for the Jets from last year. So that's somewhat problematic. I still think Buffalo is the team to beat in that division. I think the Jets are absolutely right up there if everything goes according to plan. But here's something that nobody's talking about, okay? I want to be clear in the way I say this. I have a lot of people that work in Green Bay and cover the Packers. It is a different dynamic, the relationship between the Packers beat crowd and how they handle players and the New York beat crowd and how 100%. They handle players. Like one of the reasons I thought Zach Wilson was going to struggle, he's from a tiny town in Utah, went down the road to BYU, and never had to deal with all to me, it wasn't even about stuff on the field. It was all the other stuff that you have to manage when you're the quarterback of the Jets. And, he had that disastrous press conference where he said, no, I don't have to apologize to anybody. And it was just like the dumbest thing he could have said. If Aaron Rodgers goes in there and says, hey, everybody relax, the New York beat writer is going to be, no, we're not relaxing. Answer the freaking question.
The city doesn't know what that means. The entire city.
Correct. So if let's say they get off to an 0-1, 0-2 start, Aaron can't just say everything's going to be fine. They're going to say, well, why? Why do you think it's going to be fine? What are you doing? Look, can he handle it? Absolutely. It's just a different dynamic. It's just, you couldn't go from a bigger change in how a team is covered in Green Bay as opposed to how it's covered in New York.
No, 100%. And this next question, I will admit I'm going to be biased because I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. So to me, it is win at all costs. And now I believe the Jets now hold the mantle, thanks to the Sacramento Kings, as having the longest playoff drought in North American professional sports. I think it's 12 or 13 years, something like that. So when I see online after the deal became official, we found out what was given for each team, there was some talk that the New York Jets gave up too much. I'm of the belief, I just said it, the Jets could have had a decent quarterback and they make the playoffs. You got to do what you got to do to make the playoffs. Even if Aaron Rodgers is 39 years old and he had a little bit of injuries and last year wasn't the greatest, what do you make of that opinion that the Jets gave up too much?
Well, they gave him more than they wanted to. There's no question about it. And here's the deal. if they win, it doesn't matter. But if they don't win, it matters. Like a lot of people would say, Jesus, the Rams, look at all those draft picks they gave up and all that stuff for Matthew Stafford. But they won a Super Bowl, so it's worth it. But that's the level, right? This has to be Peyton to Denver, Brady to Tampa level of success for this to be considered a success for the Jets. Like, even if they make the playoffs, okay, let's say they go 11-6 or whatever, and they win a wild card round, and then they lose in the division round. I don't know. I don't think that's enough. I mean, you've given up a lot of capital. Look, you got to get a quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I understand that. But it only works if they win. If they don't win, and I mean win, like get to a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. They haven't been to a Super Bowl since Super Bowl III. Okay, Super Bowl III was the last time they appeared on Super Bowl Sunday, and they had a couple of AFC Championship game appearances with Mark Sanchez, but they were never really in either one of those games. So they need to win. They need to win for this to be a success. Otherwise, they did give up too much.
And my last question on Rodgers, from a Las Vegas Raiders fan perspective, do you think that the Raiders will regret not making the move to get Aaron? Obviously, they signed Jimmy G this offseason and kind of went different ways, but do you think that the Raiders brass will regret not making that move and trying to make that push this year?
That's a great question, because you look at what the Raiders have done, right? They've essentially, there's a million moves that they made. I understand that. But essentially, they've traded Derek Carr for Jimmy Garoppolo, and they got rid of Darren Waller and brought in Jacoby Myers, right? So that's essentially what they've done. All the other little parts, fine, whatever. You got Philip Dorsett, everything you want to do with that. He's not a significant player. So you're basically saying, if you're the Raiders, okay, are we better in 2023 with Jimmy Garoppolo instead of Derek Carr and losing Darren Waller to bring in Jacoby Myers? And I get it, Darren didn't play a lot last year. I don't know that they are. And quite frankly, we still don't have a Josh Jacobs situation resolved. And he was the most dynamic weapon they had on offense. So at this point, I can't say with any certainty if they're any better. And I certainly would have. I mean, it's funny. Like if Aaron Rodgers didn't want to go to the AFC West because of Patrick Mahomes, I don't know if that's the case. Why would you want to go to the AFC East, where every team is also very good?
I mean, the AFC, point blank, period. Just the whole conference.
Well, think about that. Look at the difference in the top level quarterbacks now. I don't think I've ever seen a wider discrepancy. Mahomes, Burrow, Rodgers, Allen, Herbert, Lawrence, so many guys. Tua, throw him in there. Lamar Jackson is still a member of the Baltimore Ravens, okay? And then the top quarterbacks in the NFC are Jalen Hurts, and you pick, right? Is it Kirk Cousins? Is it Derek Carr? Is it
Stafford, maybe? I don't know.
Is it Stafford? Is it Dak Prescott? I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a wider range of top QBs in one conference and the top QBs in the other conference.
It's kind of similar back in the 2000s when the Western Conference in the NBA was so loaded and the Eastern Conference was boo-boo for so long. And this next question, it's interesting when you look at the Raiders front office, because obviously it's a new regime, Ziegler and McDaniels, and that first offseason last year, they give the extension to Derek Carr, they give the extension to Waller, they trade for Devontae Adams, and then this year, you brought it up. Other than the trades and getting rid of Derek Carr and Darren Waller, it's been very insignificant. And hey, we have 12 picks and we're really going to get our core. So it's the complete opposite. It's a 180 from each year. And when you look at regimes that have come out of Foxborough, my question is going to be this: do you think the Patriots way works outside of Foxborough?
Yeah, well, actually, the Patriots way is happening in Kansas City right now. You think about it. What the Patriots way is exactly what the Chiefs are doing. We have a generational quarterback. We know that we can win every time we go to the field because we have him. And now we use him as a recruiting tool. Hey, Juju, you're not doing anything. Why don't you come here, play for us for a year? You might win a ring and then you go get paid. Bam. Okay. Brown, when he left the Patriots, hey, he won a Super Bowl, go get paid, goes to the Raiders. Okay. Gets paid, then decides he wants to go back to New England. So the Patriot way is now really the Kansas City way. And the only place the Patriot way has worked outside of Foxborough, to me, is for a guy who never coached under Bill Belichick, but might as well have. He played under him in Mike Vrabel. The way Mike Vrabel has made chicken salad out of you-know-what in Tennessee for a bunch of years, to me, he's the most successful branch of the Bill Belichick coaching tree. It's not Josh McDaniels. It's not Matt Patricia. It certainly isn't Joe Judge. It hasn't been very, whether it's Charlie Weiss or Romeo Crennel, none of these guys have had a lot of success outside of Foxborough, except for Mike Vrabel.
No, 100%. And it's also, truth be told, it kind of worries me, some of the similarities that McDaniels has had in Denver that he's having here, getting rid of the quarterback, getting rid of a star. He got rid of Brandon Marshall. He got rid of Darren Waller. We'll see. Hunter Renfrow rumors he might be traded. One last thing on the Raiders as far as the draft. There's 4 scenarios mapped out that I think they could do. They stay put. They take the pick in the 7th, then that 7th slot, and that's it. They can trade up. They can trade down. I told you they had 12 picks, meaning they can make their pick at 7 and then try to trade back into the first round. Out of those 4 scenarios that I kind of laid out for you, which one do you think is more likely, or what would you do if you were the GM?
Yeah, this is a really weird draft. And I want to say this the right way. First of all, there's only 31 first-round picks because of the Dolphins losing one, so there's instead of 32. But, the thing about the draft is you got to use your picks. And what I mean by that is, just because someone's taken in the first round doesn't necessarily mean they're first round talent. Like, I would argue, I don't think this is a very deep draft. I don't think top to bottom, this is a draft, quite frankly, that you want to have 12 picks in. Okay. It's not a super deep draft. Problem with a first round pick is you can't say pass. I don't want it. I mean, you can, that would be dumb, but so you have to make a pick whether you believe that the player is there or not. So I don't think this is a really deep draft. And so I'm not sure I want to accumulate as many picks as possible. I just want to find like 2 solid dudes. And recent draft history for the Raiders has not been great. Okay. The 2020 draft is just
great. You can't even bring up 2 people still on the roster from all those drafts.
Yeah. 2019 wasn't much better. You just shipped out Cleveland Ferrell, who went 3rd overall that year, which surprised all of us on the stage in Nashville that night. The point I'm making is, I don't know. I think you just if I'm the Raiders, I let the board fall to me. Okay. And see what's available at 7. If you love the player, then you take the player. But the thing about the draft is you have to make the picks. The teams in the NFL can only pick what the colleges give them. And this year, it's not a great draft.
Yeah, no, 100%. And as far as today, the news of the day has been Will Levis, and him being the number 1 pick and the odds shifting his way, Bryce Young's shifting down. And, for the longest time, these past couple months, it's been the 2-headed race. It's been Bryce Young and it's been CJ Stroud. You tweeted out something earlier this week that any information that comes out this week, please know that comes with an agenda, whether it's because of a front office, a player, an agent. Everyone is trying to place their stake in the land and try to.
They're trying to game the system. They're trying to game the system.
So what do you make of the situations that we have here with Will Levis, Bryce Young, and CJ Stroud as everything is fluctuating?
Well, it tells me that there isn't one guy that anybody really loves. I mean, if that's on my look, there may be 5 quarterbacks going in the first round, and we have a ton of quarterback needy teams. But that doesn't mean that these are the quarterbacks they should be taking, right? Like, let's look at 2 quarterback-rich drafts, okay? 2020, awesome. Burrow, Bengals, home run. Herbert, Chargers, home run. Tua, if he's healthy, really, really good. Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round, home run. That was 2020. Now let's do 2021. First pick, Trevor Lawrence. After a year with a fake head coach, he finally has a good head coach in the NFL. There was an urban reawareness with his game. So he's trending in the right direction. Second pick is Zach Wilson. He's now garbage behind. He's behind Aaron Rodgers. The Jets don't want anything to do with him. The 3rd overall pick that year was Trey Lance, who can't get ahead of the last pick of last year's draft in Brock Purdy. So just because all these quarterbacks are available, it doesn't mean it's going to work. Mac Jones, maybe on the way out of New England. They don't love him anymore. Justin Fields is trending in the right direction. We had 5 quarterbacks go in 2021, and I think 2 of them you feel good about. All the 3 others, no. So I think there's a fatal flaw in every quarterback's availability in this year's draft, and there's not one that I would pin my entire franchise on and say, without question, this is going to be the guy that can deliver.
Raiders fans, I hope you're listening to him. He's preaching what I've been saying all these months. Chiefs trends officer for Caesars Sportsbook, Trey Wingo, joining us. Last question, my friend.
Yes,
The
sir.
NFL draft, the broadcast, is one of the most unique things in television, period. The only thing is maybe an election where you have correspondents in all these different, cities watching the polls. And you got to take part, and you were hosting, I guess we'll call it the COVID year, the one where it was all quarantined and Zoom cameras everywhere, and CeeDee Lamb and his side chick trying to grab his phone, and Goodell on his couch. I want to know, obviously there's so much preparation, there's so many notes, you have to know so many of these players, but on top of that, everything else that was going on. Like, if there's one thing that sticks out of doing that broadcast, what would it be?
We had no idea if it was going to work. I mean, like, honestly, none of us knew if this was actually going to work. And the thing that made it even crazier, because of COVID, the NFL studios in Los Angeles, you weren't allowed to go to work. So the NFL, we folded in the NFL network into our coverage. It was me by myself in the studio with 2 camera operators and a floor manager.
No robot cameras. There were actual operators.
There were 2 robot cameras and 1 guy working the gym. And then everybody in the control room had to have a mask on the entire time. Okay, we're talking 4 hours one night, 4 hours the next night, and 8 hours the next day. Those guys were freaking heroes, man, because they had the masks on the entire time that they were out there. But it was me in a room, and there were 6 giant monitors, and it was Mel Kiper, Louis Riddick, Booger McFarland, Michael Irvin, Kurt Warner, and Daniel Jeremiah. And right before we went on the air, I said, guys, to quote Samuel L. Jackson from Jurassic Park, hold on to your butts. Like, who knows what's going to happen? And it went off without a hitch. It was unbelievable. The things that everybody did behind the scenes, whether it was Brian Ryder, the executive producer, the directors, all those guys, the things that they were able to pull off was remarkable. 40 days before that draft started, we were all set up in Vegas. We had everything set up. It was going to be right there, Caesars Palace, the fountains at the Bellagio, all this kind of stuff. And they pulled the plug, and we had 40 days to figure out what the hell we were going to do. And somehow, the only thing that screwed up was something I did wrong, because that we had this thing. Okay, you have to really make sure because normally if you're on a set, and they're right next to you, you turn to people and say, hey guys, what do you think about this? And they'll jump in and do all this kind of stuff, and they'll play off each other. Well, I had to make sure I asked a specific question, like, Louis, why do you like this guy? Mel, why don't you like this trade? Kurt, what do you think is the best attributes of this quarterback? And it was day 3, and we're all a little fried. And at one point, someone was picked, and I said, so what do you think of this? And I didn't specifically mention anybody's name. And there was they started talking. Finally, I said, stop, let's try that again. Daniel, what do you think of this? So the only thing that messed up was me. I was the only one that did anything wrong. Everything else was flawless. It was unbelievable.
Nah, it's remarkable. I want to know how many cameras were sent out to these players' homes. Who made the Best Buy purchase? Absolutely unbelievable. Well, thank you for giving us a little bit of insight onto that. That's I could. See, we still have hitches today, and we're not in quarantine.
Exactly.
My bad for muting. It happens. But Trey, thanks for the insight as always. Have a busy and wonderful week, and we'll talk to you here after the draft.
You got it, man. Always good to talk to you.